In early October 1950, the first American troops marched north, across the 38th parallel, toward China. By the end of October, MacArthur's forces had captured the North Korean capital of Pyongyang. By Thanksgiving Day, they approached the Yalu River. As the general prepared for the final offensive, he cabled President Truman. This should, for all practical purposes, end the war. But MacArthur had underestimated the enemy. On the night of November 25th, the Chinese army struck with fury.
At the White House in Washington, top defense officials of the nation gathered to discuss the gravest world crisis since Poland and Pearl Harbor. The flagrant aggression of Chinese communist troops in Korea arouses the country's ire. With the North Korean bandits well under control and with the promise that UN troops would be withdrawn, the unexpected entry of 300,000 Red Chinese across the Manchurian border may well precipitate World War III. President Truman voices his accusation of Red imperialism.
The forces of the United Nations are in Korea to put down an aggression that threatens not only the whole fabric of the United Nations, but all human hopes of peace and justice. If the United Nations yields to the forces of aggression, no nation will be safe or secure. If aggression is successful in Korea, we can expect it to spread throughout Asia and Europe and to this hemisphere. We are fighting in Korea for our own national security and survival. We have committed ourselves to the cause of a just and peaceful world order through the United Nations. We stand by that commitment.
On the battlefront in Korea, United Nations forces fight desperately to meet the Red attack. Here our troops must face what General MacArthur has termed a new war. Outnumbered more than 2-to-1 by Chinese and North Koreans, the UN forces hope to regroup and to meet the overwhelming attack which has broken their fluid lines of defense across northern Korea.
UN forces fought desperately to escape the Chinese onslaught. At the Chosin Reservoir, 6,000 Marines were encircled by the enemy. With temperatures dipping to minus 40 degrees below zero, their situation seemed hopeless. But in a heroic effort, dubbed the Chosin Breakout, their big guns and air support smashed the Chinese lines. 60,000 enemy troops were killed, and the Marines escaped. General MacArthur demanded that he be allowed to wage an all-out war against China. But President Truman was determined that Korea should remain a limited war. When MacArthur made it clear that he disagreed with that policy, the president fired him. By the spring of 1951, the war had degenerated into a brutal stalemate near the 38th parallel. American troops continued to fight and die in Korea for 2 long years. In the end, more than 4 million soldiers and civilians were killed during the conflict. Among them, 40,000 Americans died. For Harry Truman, the costly war in Korea was a crushing blow to his presidency. His popularity, already weakened by charges of losing China, collapsed. When the ceasefire agreement was finally signed in July 1953, it was Truman's successor, President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who earned the credit.
We have won an armistice on a single battleground, not peace in the world. We and our United Nation allies must be vigilant against the possibility of untoward developments.
Korea is often called the Forgotten War, but it dramatically changed America's sense of security. For many, it reinforced the belief in monolithic communism, the assumption that all communist movements were orchestrated from Moscow. The idea poisoned American politics for decades and set the stage for the disaster in Vietnam. Korea also put the country on a permanent war footing, leading to spiraling defense spending and greatly increasing the Pentagon's influence. By the end of his term in 1960, President Eisenhower warned of a growing threat to the nation from within.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.